It had been 3 years since I'd even said his name out loud. 3 years since I'd walked out of that office with my reputation shredded and my inbox filled with sympathy emails from people too afraid to talk to me in person. And then tonight, just past midnight, my phone buzzed. One new email. From Richard Lawson. Subject, I need to talk to you. It's urgent. I stared at the screen, half expecting it to be spam or some weird phishing attempt. Richard Lawson, my former boss, the man who'd once stood in front of 200 employees and called me a liability, the man who'd watched my career go up in flames and said nothing to stop it. For a long minute, I just sat there, watching that little subject line glow in the dark of my apartment. It felt like a ghost had reached through the screen. The cursor blinked beside the word, open. My hand didn't move. You know how sometimes your body remembers pain before your mind does? My chest tightened, the same way it had that night in the conference room, the one where he'd looked me in the eye and said, "You'll never work in this industry again." He was right. I didn't. The startup I joined afterwards collapsed 6 months later. My name, dragged through LinkedIn gossip threads and Slack DMs, became a cautionary tale. I did contract work under pseudonyms, wrote code under fake initials, anything to stay invisible. And it worked. I disappeared. Until tonight. I clicked. The message opened in a single paragraph, short, rushed, like it had been written in panic. Evan, if you're reading this, I need your help. You were right about everything. I can't explain here. Please meet me. Anywhere you say. I'll cover your time. It's happening again. For a second I thought it was some cruel joke. Maybe someone hacked his email, maybe they wanted a reaction. But no. The timestamp was from his company address, the same one that had sent my termination notice 3 years ago. And at the bottom, one small attachment. A file named truth.zip. My cursor hovered over it. My rational brain screamed no. Nothing about this man or that company had ever brought me anything but damage. But beneath the fear, something else started moving. That old sharp curiosity that used to make me dig through server logs at 3 a.m., chasing patterns everyone else missed. I downloaded the file. The progress bar crawled. A part of me prayed it wouldn't finish. But it did. Inside, 3 text files, each named with a date. The first one, March 18th, open to a wall of corporate jargon and half-finished notes. But halfway down, one line froze me cold. They're cleaning house. Same tactic as before. Blame the analyst. Analyst. That's what I'd been. There were more lines, references to Q17, audit red flags, and a list of names. Some I recognized, some I didn't. But one of them, highlighted in red, was mine. My name. As if I'd never left. As if they were still using me for something. I scrolled faster, my pulse matching the flick of the mouse wheel. The second file was shorter, a single sentence. If you're reading this, it means I couldn't stop them. The room felt smaller. My fingers went numb. Outside, a car passed, headlights cutting across the blinds, and for a moment I saw my reflection in the window. Tired, unshaven, eyes wide. A man who'd built a quiet life on top of broken glass, realizing the shards were still beneath him. I didn't sleep that night. I read every file, every word. By sunrise, one thing was clear. Whatever was happening at Lawson's company, it was connected to me, to the scandal that had destroyed my name. And now, for some reason, Richard wanted me involved again. By noon, I'd drafted a reply, rewritten it 5 times, and still hadn't hit send. What was I even supposed to say? Sure, let's reopen my trauma. Finally, I typed, where and when? I hit send before I could stop myself. 2 minutes later, his response came back. No greeting, no sign-off. Just coordinates, latitude, longitude, and one word beneath it. Tomorrow. I sat there staring at those numbers. It took me a while to realize they pointed to a coffee shop downtown, the same one where he'd fired me. My stomach turned, but I couldn't look away. 3 years of silence, And now this? And then, just as I was about to close the laptop, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. At the bottom of his first email, in the white space below his signature, there was a faint string of text, almost invisible unless you highlighted it. They're watching. And below it, smaller still, a date. Tomorrow's. And then I noticed the attachment. The coffee shop hadn't changed, which somehow made it worse. Same chip tile at the threshold that caught the toe of your shoe. Same chalkboard menu with misspelled syrups. Same corner table under a vent that breathed cold air down the back of your neck. 3 years ago, I'd stood right there while Richard Lawson ended my career in a voice polite enough to pass HR muster. Today, he was already at the corner table, back to the wall, hands around a paper cup he wasn't drinking. He didn't stand to greet me. He looked thinner, the kind of thin that starts in the eyes. His hair, once aggressively perfect, was overgrown at the sides, badly cut in a hurry. The man who taught me never to show fear looked like he'd been living on it. "Thanks for coming," he said. No smile, no attempt at the old manager's charm. He gestured at the seat across from him. I sat, keeping my backpack on, my jacket zipped. He noticed. "You look good," he tried. "You look scared," I said. A barista banged something metal in the back. The sound hit my nerves like a memory. I waited. He didn't start with an apology. He reached into his coat, set a small hard drive on the table, and slid it toward me like contraband. "They're going to do it again," he said. Different analyst, same story, same financial quarter, same client. "Which part is the same?" I asked. "The lies you told, or the night you stood me up here and let me take the fall?" His jaw clenched. "I know what I did." "Do you?" The old heat rose in my throat, the one I used to swallow down during all-hands meetings, because I remember a very specific sentence. This was Evan's oversight. Remember that? That sentence cost me 1.5 years of work and every reference I had. He shut his eyes for a beat. When he opened them again, I saw something I'd never seen there before. Not power, not calculation, just a man who'd realized the machine he'd built could grind him, too. But that was just the beginning. He said it so quietly, I almost missed it. He looked at the vent, then the window, then me. "I can't trust internal channels. I can't go to the board. Legal's compromised. And IT." "You were IT," I said. "You hired everyone in that department." "I hired people to win," he said. "Turns out someone else hired them to bury." The barista called a name. A door hissed on the espresso machine. I let the silence fill with caffeine and steam. Finally, I nudged the hard drive back toward him. "Why me?" "Because you were the only one who ever asked why the numbers didn't smell right." He gave a humorless smile. "And because you don't owe me anything anymore." "That's generous," I said. He leaned in, elbows tight, voice lower. "Quarter before you left, you flagged an anomaly in the vendor bills. The Q17 folder. We told you to drop it because the client's timeline mattered more than the discrepancy. You remember?" I remembered the conversation word for word. I remembered going home angry and writing it all down because that's what I do when something feels wrong. I remembered asking calmly who approved a vendor, with no physical address and a phone number that forward looped. I remembered the meeting afterward. That wasn't about the vendor at all. It was about my tone. Richard watched me relive it. "The vendor wasn't a vendor," he said. "It was a pipe. Money out, favors in. Someone inside created the pipe and attached it to projects with enough moving parts to hide the flow. When you noticed they needed you discredited, the cleanest way was to frame you for a different mistake." "You stood there and let them," I said. He stared at his cup. I rationalized it. Told myself I was protecting the company. I told myself you'd land somewhere good. I told myself a lot of things. "Congrats," I said. "Sounds like it worked out." "It didn't," he said. "When you left, they kept using your credentials. They'd cloned your permissions. After you were gone, it became convenient to have a ghost-level analyst inside systems who could access without trigger alerts. When audit flags popped, guess whose old login they found on the logs? Mine." He nodded. "Yours." You could have told me this 3 years ago. I didn't know 3 years ago, he said. I suspected. I felt something off. But I didn't know. I know now. How? He hesitated, then tapped the hard drive. I've been copying internal emails and approval workflows to a private archive for 6 months. Metadata, too. Pull requests, edit histories, proxy logs. It's all in there. Enough to map the pipe back to people who signed my checks. I looked at the drive. My first instinct was to push it back again and walk. The second older one, the one that made me a decent analyst before I became a cautionary tale, wanted to know what the data said when someone wasn't scripting the narrative around it. He saw me waver. I'm not asking you to forgive me, he said. I'm asking you to look. And then what? I asked. We feed it to the press? We go to the SEC? You think anyone's going to believe the guy who got publicly fired for negligence? He blinked, and there it was. The calculation, the one he couldn't turn off. I think they'll believe evidence that doesn't just implicate you, he said, because it implicates me too. You're confessing? I'm trying to survive, he said. If I go down alone, I'm a headline. If I go down with the truth in both hands, I'm a witness. I laughed, short and ugly. You always were good at finding the angle. He flinched like I'd hit him. For a second, the tiredness cracked, and I saw the old Rick, the one who could sell a plan to a room without ever saying the part where he'd already decided your role. You don't have to help me, he said, tone flattening. Walk out. Pretend this never happened. But you should know this. The new analyst they're about to burn? Her name is Hannah Park. She started 2 months before you left. You mentored her. My fingers dug into the edge of the table. Hannah had sent me a thank you note after I trained her on the data pipeline, the kind of earnest, careful note people no longer write. She liked black coffee and brought her own food because she didn't trust the fridge. Hannah had DM'd me the week I left. I'm sorry. I know it's not right. I never answered. I was too busy drowning. Richard watched it land. They've ceded her approvals. The numbers will point to her if no one intervenes. The lock is going to turn on Friday. Today is Wednesday. Why tell me and not her? Because if I warn her, I confirm I'm aware of the scheme. Because my email's already being monitored, and my calendar is public, and every move I make is being recorded for the board. Because you are off their chessboard and still know where the pieces moved. He finally took a sip of what must have been cold coffee. The mask slipped another inch. Because I can't let them do to her what I let them do to you. A part of me softened at that, and I hated that it did. I shouldn't have been the person he asked for absolution. He wasn't asking, I told myself. He was outsourcing his conscience. You want me to break into your old systems, I said. Pull proof that your bosses are committing fraud, and then... What? Shame them into stopping? Not shame, he said. Leverage, timing, exposure when it matters. I pushed back my chair a fraction. I'm not your fixer. I'm not your redemption arc. I know. He placed a folded napkin on the table and wrote a number on it. It wasn't money. It was a door code. If you decide to look, you'll need that. And this. He slid over a key fob, the kind that opened server cages and doors with red lights. I recognized the feel. I'd worn one on my belt for 2 years. A kid laughed behind us. Cups knocked. Life went on. Richard's voice dropped to a near whisper. They think you're a ghost. You disappeared. That's your advantage. I stared at the fob. My breath went shallow. The way it used to, when a deployed prod went sideways and every second mattered. It wasn't nostalgia. It was muscle memory. Why should I care? I asked, more to myself than to him. Because you're still reading logs at 3 a.m, he said, nodding at the shadows under my eyes. Because part of you wants proof you weren't crazy. Because part of you wants... Don't finish that sentence, I said. My voice surprised me. It had weight again. You don't get to narrate me anymore. For the first time since I sat down, something like respect flickered across his face. He nodded. Fair. He stood to go, but paused, hands flat on the table. There's one more thing. I waited. If this goes wrong, I didn't email you. We didn't meet. You never touched that drive. And if it goes right, he tried to smile and failed. Then maybe we stop them from doing it to anyone else. He left without looking back. I didn't move for a long minute. I watched the door ease shut and realized my hands were shaking. I reached for the drive, then pulled back, and then reached again. The key fob lay between my fingers like a coin flipped long ago and still spinning. On the walk home, the city felt both too loud and muffled, like I was moving underwater. At a crosswalk, a bus roared past, smearing my reflection across a dozen windows. By the time I climbed my stairs, I knew two things. I didn't trust Richard, and he was right about Hannah. I set the drive on my desk and stared at my monitor until my eyes burned. I told myself I just wanted to see. Just confirm whether the vendor pipe existed. Just check if Hannah's approvals had been edited. Just look. I mounted the drive. Folders nested inside folders, dates aligned with meeting minutes I still remembered, file names that tasted like old coffee. Pulling on one thread revealed 3 more. Whoever built the pipe had been careful, but not careful enough to hide from someone who knew where curiosity lives. Half an hour in, my anger sharpened into something cleaner. Not noble, nothing like that. Just precise. I realized I'd spent 3 years arguing with a story other people told about me. Now I had an outline of the story they told about themselves. And there it was. Hannah's user ID next to approvals with timestamps that didn't match her calendar. A motion sensor log placing her in a different building when she supposedly authorized a vendor change. A pattern as neat as a noose. My phone buzzed with an unknown number. I didn't answer. It buzzed again, same number. I turned it face down and kept reading. When it buzzed a third time, I picked up, ready to hang up if it was sales. A man's voice, low and careful. You met Lawson today. I didn't speak. You shouldn't have, the voice said, and then the line clicked dead. I froze, mouth dry, staring at my reflection in the black screen. I looked down at the drive, at the lines on my monitor, at the key fob, at the napkin with the door code, at the life I'd built out of avoidance. I opened a blank document and started writing everything I'd already seen, every file name, every path. I saved it locally and copied it to the cloud, then to an encrypted thumb drive, then to an old laptop with no Wi-Fi, because paranoia is just experience renamed. It was almost midnight when my building's hallway lights flickered. Twice. I stood listening, footsteps on the stairs, stopping at my floor, then continuing up. A door opened somewhere above me. Closed. The silence that followed didn't feel like peace. It felt like waiting. My phone lit up with a new email. No subject line, no body. Just an attachment icon that wouldn't load. I watched the spinning wheel hesitate, catch, then freeze. The lights in my apartment dimmed, surged, stabilized. I held my breath without realizing it. And then silence. The kind that means something's gone wrong. When I woke up, the apartment smelled faintly of burned dust. The kind you only notice after something short circuits. My computer screen was black. I pressed the power button. Nothing. The hard drive that Richard had given me sat on the desk. A dull rectangle of metal and silence. Its indicator light was dead. I should have felt panic. Instead, I felt something closer to inevitability. Like waking up in a story you already knew the ending to. Someone had been inside. The lock on my door was unmarked, but the chain had been reset from the inside. Wrong side facing out. A small thing, unless you'd lived through enough inspections to know how precise people can be when they don't want you to know they were here. My phone buzzed again, same unknown number from the night before. This time I answered. "Evan," a voice said. Calm, quiet, male, older. "You shouldn't have opened the drive." I didn't say anything. My thumb hovered over the hang-up button. Lawson made you a target the moment he reached out. He thought he could pull you in quietly. He was wrong. Who is this? Pause. Then, someone trying to keep you from ending up like him? The call dropped. Like him. For a second I stood completely still. Then I grabbed my jacket, my keys, and the dead hard drive, and walked out. I didn't lock the door behind me. There wasn't a point anymore. The coordinates Richard had sent me weren't just for the coffee shop. Buried in the metadata of his message was another location, an office park on the edge of town. I hadn't noticed it until the night before, while digging through the headers. I drove there without fully knowing why. Maybe I wanted proof. Maybe I wanted to see where this all actually began. The building was empty. 3 floors, glass facade, a sign still half bolted to the front. Syntax Solutions, Richard's company's old shell brand. The front door was locked, but the fob he'd given me flashed green when I tried it. Inside, stale air, faint hum of servers somewhere deep within, and the quiet, rhythmic sound of a ventilation unit still alive in the dark. I followed the noise. Down a narrow hallway lined with offices stripped bare, desks, cables, coffee stains like ghosts of arguments past. Then I found it, a room still powered, door slightly ajar, light pulsing behind a tinted glass pane. Inside were 4 server towers, blinking in asynchronous rhythm. One of them had a label, Archives 03, Q17. That label hit like a hammer. I sat down at the workstation, half expecting alarms, but nothing happened. The machine woke like it had been waiting for someone to notice it. The login screen was plain. I tried my old analyst credentials. 3 years dead. Access granted. They'd never deleted me. Inside were the raw data repositories. Invoices, approval logs, transaction trails. Everything Richard had hinted at. But this wasn't just accounting fraud. This was infrastructure. Shell vendors wired into government contracts. Fake audits masking missing millions. And every false approval, every transaction signature, bore one of 2 usernames, mine and Hannah's. My heart climbed into my throat. I traced one of the trials, a simple vendor payout. $42,000 routed through an entity called Northridge Exports. It should have been a dead end, but one click deeper I saw the destination. Lawson Consulting, LLC, his company. Richard hadn't been exposing anything. He'd been covering himself. Every document he'd sent, every word he'd said. Bait. A narrative to make me reopen access, authenticate the credentials they'd left behind. And now I'd just walked straight into the system that tied both of us to fraud. The monitors flickered. One by one, the files began to vanish. Not deleted, overwritten. Someone was live inside the network, purging everything as I watched. Then a new message appeared across the main screen, black letters on white. "Stop digging, Evan." I spun in the chair, half expecting someone behind me. Nothing, just the hum. The second line appeared. "You were never supposed to see this." And then, "He's gone." My stomach twisted. Gone could mean 100 things. But I knew, before I let myself believe it, Richard Lawson was dead. A mechanical whine filled the room, the servers powering down. I pulled the drive cables, one after another, until the noise died. My pulse was shaking my vision. I yanked out a flash from my pocket, dumped what I could, raw logs, fragments of code, a few still active audit chains. When I left, the office was dark again, like it had swallowed itself. I drove aimlessly for an hour. Rain started halfway through. The world outside blurred into streaks of gray and sodium light. When I finally stopped, it was in front of an old gas station that hadn't changed since the 90s. I sat there trying to breathe. Richard was dead. The company was wiping evidence. And my name, still inside those systems, was going to surface again. Then my phone vibrated with a new message from an unknown address. Subject line, "He told me you'd understand." Attached was a single image, a scan of a handwritten note. "If you're reading this, they got to me first. Don't go to the police. Don't go to the press. Everything is backed up where you'd expect it to be. You once told me you didn't trust the cloud. Neither do they." I read it 3 times before I noticed something. The timestamp on the file. It was sent 20 minutes before he died. He'd known. He'd been trying to point me somewhere. Where you'd expect it to be. The phrase echoed in my head as I pulled up my laptop and scanned through old backups. There it was. A folder I hadn't touched in years, buried deep under freelance project archives. Backups, cloudless, chaque a. Inside, an encrypted archive labeled Archive Final. The same pattern as the files from the first drive, but this one was newer. A week old. The password field blinked. I stared at it for a long moment before typing something I hadn't said in 3 years. Lawson still lies. Access granted. The folder exploded open. Hundreds of documents, unredacted reports, internal chat logs, contract templates, everything. It wasn't just fraud. It was evidence of a coordinated cover-up involving multiple executives, offshore accounts, and one thing I hadn't expected. Government data contracts labeled Defense IRND 821. I scrolled faster, half reading, half disbelieving, until I found a folder labeled H. Park, Hannah. The logs were timestamped last week. She'd tried to pull her own audit, had flagged the anomalies, the same ones I had 3 years ago. The final line of her last entry read, "If anything happens to me, it means the cycle's repeating. Someone has to stop it." I stared at it for a long time, pulse echoing in my ears. Then I closed the laptop, wiped my fingerprints from the lid, and packed everything I had. The files, the drives, the flash. I didn't know who was watching, but I knew one thing for certain. They thought I was the same man they fired, the man who would fold, hide, delete, disappear. They were wrong. That night, I stopped being the hero. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. Not because I'd slept, I hadn't, but because something in me had shifted. The fear that had lived in my chest for 3 years was gone, burned out and replaced by something quieter, sharper. By 6 a.m., I'd printed everything that mattered. The documents from the hidden archive, the chat logs, the proof of falsified approvals tied to Hannah's ID, to mine, and to Richard's. Each page was marked, ordered, sealed in an envelope. I wasn't planning to give it to the police. They were already part of the machine. And I wasn't planning to go to the press either, not the traditional kind. There's something you learn when your life burns down online. People believe screenshots more than they believe statements. So I decided to give them screenshots. I set up a burner account. No name, no photo, no hint of who I was. Just a username that meant nothing. Audit Ghost 17. I uploaded the files to a public drive, watermarked with timestamps and traceable metadata, and scheduled the post to go live at noon, sharp, the exact time Syntax Solutions was set, to present its quarterly results to investors. The timer started ticking. While I waited, I drove, not far, just out of the city, to the kind of overlook where people go to breathe when they've been holding it for too long. Fog covered everything below me. Roads, buildings, power lines, all vanished under a pale gray sea. For the first time in years, my head was clear. Richard had lied, yes. He'd used me, yes. But he'd also left a door open, a door I could either walk through or close forever. I'd chosen to walk through. At 11:59, I connected my hotspot and watched the seconds fall away. 12 ibastus. Upload complete. 12:01, the first ping. 12:03, 20 retweets. 12:05, screenshots spreading like wildfire. The drive link hit Reddit, then Twitter, then corporate forums. Within 10 minutes, it was trending. By 12:10, someone at Syntax noticed. By 12:15, their website crashed. And by 12:20, every name from the Q17 chain was being dissected by thousands of strangers who didn't need context to smell blood. I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I just watched. Because what I'd built wasn't revenge. It was gravity. And gravity doesn't gloat. It just pulls. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. For a second, I thought it might be Hannah. But the voice that came through was older, tired. "You did it," the man said. You shouldn't have, but you did. Who is this? You'll see soon enough. The line went dead. 5 minutes later, my screen lit up again. Not a call this time, a notification. A live stream. Breaking news. Former tech executive found dead after massive data leak. Richard Lawson. His photo flashed beside the headline. I watched it in silence. He hadn't been innocent. He'd just been too late to run. By evening, the world had changed. The company's stock plummeted. The board resigned. Investigations were opened in 3 countries. Every document, every false signature, every ghost analyst ID, all laid bare. And buried in the metadata, one line stood out, added by Richard himself before he died. For what it's worth, I was wrong about him. I didn't tell anyone who I was, didn't come forward, didn't ask for thanks. 2 days later, I got an email from an unknown address. No subject line, no body, just a single link. It led to a small, password-protected folder. Inside, 3 files. The first was an internal memo. Syntax Solutions, Board Acknowledgement of Misconduct. The second, a scanned resignation letter, signed by the remaining executives. The third, a simple text file. She's safe, I made sure. Thank you. HP. Hannah. Alive. I sat there, staring at the screen until my eyes burned. Then I closed the laptop, deleted every trace of the burner accounts, and walked out into the cool night. The city was quiet. Not peaceful, not pure, just quiet. I walked past office windows, the glow of monitors, the hum of lives that kept turning. Somewhere inside that endless motion, my name was probably being whispered again. But this time, not as a warning. 3 years ago, they buried me under lies. Now, I dug my way out and buried them instead. I didn't need applause. I didn't need to win. I just needed the silence back. And now, finally, I had it.